Okay, today I will cover the entire RBT Competency Assessment. I know this one says initial, but the initial and the renewal, okay, they're the exact same thing, right? The difference is the initial you complete before you take your exam, and then the renewal you complete whenever your license is about to expire. Either way, it covers the same material and you need to take both, okay? So what I'm gonna do, all right, is I'm going to go through and act as your BCBA, okay? And I'm going to my best ability, do both the interview, okay, and then the role play, and with the client assessment types for each task, okay? So I'm a BCBA who does competency assessments, all right? So I'm going to do my best to show you what we're looking for, right? So I'm going to go through each item, okay, and map out each. So follow along. I'm going to put timestamps below so you can jump around to what you need help on. Okay. The main thing with the competency assessments is you shouldn't be nervous, right? They're not meant to be tricky. Okay. We just want to be sure that you know the basics. That's what we're looking for in competency assessments, the basics. Okay. So where would you start? Well, again, the initial and the renewal are the same. So whatever your name is, your name, okay, would go here. And then your ID, whatever it is in the system, okay, would go here. And as a BCBA, all right, we can either do this with a client or role played, okay, or an interview style, depending on the type, okay. Given COVID, there's been a lot of role play, right? Which just is the nature of it, but sometimes you'll be with the client, it just depends. So I'll write your name, I'll write your ID, okay, and then we'll get into each task, okay. So we'll start with measurement, right? So continuous measurement, okay. So the assessment type here, let's say, is interview. So I'm the BCBA, and I'll ask you, how would you take frequency data? You would tell me, okay, I would count how many times the behavior occurs. This frequency is count. I would say, how do you take duration data? You would say, I would record how long the behavior lasts, because duration is how long the behavior lasts, right? Latency and IRT, how would you take latency data? Well, it's the time between me giving the instruction, okay, and the behavior starting. And then how would you take IRT? IRT is the time between two responses, okay? That's interview for continuous measurement, okay? You would do well, I would check you off. Now, what about role play, okay? Take frequency data on, so I would say take frequency data on me touching my nose. Okay, you would record what? 1, 2, 3. Frequency of 3. What about duration for touching my nose? 1, 2, 3, 4. You would say 4 seconds. Okay. What about latency for touching nose? You would say touch your nose. 2, 3, 4, 5. Touch. Okay. The latency between saying touch your nose and me touching my nose, 5 seconds. What about IRT for touching nose? Okay. 1, 2. 2 seconds. The time in between touching my nose was 2 seconds. Okay. There you go. That's continuous measurement, right? If you had a client, it would be the same idea. Okay. All you would do is take your very simple measurements, your continuous measurements. Okay. And that's all we're looking for in our assessments, right? We want to see, can you do the basics? Okay. It's not here to trick you or make you nervous. We want to be sure that when you go see a client and we're not there, you can do the basics. So continuous measurement, you aced. Okay. Now let's talk about discontinuous measurement. Interview. Me as the BCBA might ask you, how is discontinuous measurement different than continuous? Okay. Well, you might say, we only take data on certain parts of the session. Okay. You might say continuous measurement, I take data on all behaviors. Discontinuous measurement, I only take data for 20 minutes. Okay. Discontinuous doesn't happen during the entire session. Okay. I might say name the type, name 1 or 2 discontinuous measurement procedures. You could say partial interval, you could say whole interval, you could say momentary time sampling. I would say explain partial interval to me. You would say, partial interval, the behavior is recorded or counts as an occurrence if it occurs at all during the interval. I would say, explain whole interval to me. You would say, if the behavior occurs during the entire interval, it counts as an occurrence. And then momentary time sampling, you would say, if the behavior occurs at the end of the interval, it counts as an occurrence, okay? And that would be your interview. Now, what about role play? So for partial, okay, partial, whole, and momentary, okay, we need an interval, let's say 10 seconds, okay? So how would you take partial interval data? Well, our first interval, right, 10 seconds, then 20, okay, then 30, okay? And then you would take data, okay? You have your stopwatch or your iPhone timer, or whatever you're using, right? So we're taking time data, right? So we need time, okay? They look the same, okay? So partial, right? Let's take data on me snapping my fingers, partial interval, okay? So you would start your timer and then the first 10 seconds, okay? For partial, let's say I snap my fingers 3 times. Well, what would you record? For partial, you will record one instance of behavior, right? Because it happened during the interval. Whole, did it happen throughout the entire interval or not? No, it happened 3 times, but not the whole interval, right? So you would record a 0 or an X or whatever you indicate no response. And then momentary, did it happen at the end of the interval? No, it happened in the middle, okay? So again, 0. And you would repeat that process, okay, for whatever behavior you were recording, okay? And that would be your role play. Very straightforward, okay? With the client, it's the same idea, okay? It doesn't change whether you're role playing with me, the BCBA, or your client. All you're doing is taking data like you know how, okay? So as long as you understand the concepts, right, you're going to be fine. And again, a lot of times these are done, right, interview style, okay, or during your session. So you're just running these naturally through your session, right? Because we want to see it with the client, right, or with us. Can you do it? Okay. Now, data and graphs. RBTs freak out about data and graphs. You don't need to freak out, okay? Data and graphs, very simple, okay? I would say, you know, what's the most common graph we use? You would tell me a line graph, okay? I might say, how often should we update graphs? Ideally, every session if we have the data, okay? I would say what goes on the x-axis. You would say time. I would say what goes on the y-axis. You would say behavior. And that's kind of the interview for the graphing, right? Graphing, you kind of have to do, right? And a lot of BCBAs do their own graphing. It just depends, okay? But as an RBT, you're expected to kind of understand how to do it. So let's look at one real quick, okay? So if I have my line graph, right? I'm a line graph, and I have my data, basic data here, right? So let's say our skill is matching, okay? Matching, and I have data from 5 days. So first day happened, we were, 6 times 7, 6, 8, 8. Okay, and this is all made up, right? So y-axis, okay, is your behavior. X-axis is your time, okay? So this would be matching, and this would be, sessions, whatever you're taking, okay? So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And our data, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, okay? And all you do is you take your data, okay? And you just match it up on your line graph. So the first session we had 6, second session we had 7, third we had 6, fourth we had 8, fifth we had 8. Connect the dots. There's your graph, okay? Very straightforward. Now, I might ask you, what is the trend? Well, using visual analysis, which is what we use to look at graphs, okay? You could say maybe there's a slight increasing trend, right? We started at 6.76, and now we're 8.8 consistently. So maybe a slight increasing trend. I would also accept no trend, okay? Leaning towards slight increase. I might ask you the trend, okay? We want to know which way it's going. You know, I could ask you on average, how many times do they match correctly per session? You would add up, okay, these 5 numbers, okay, and divide by 5. That would give you your average, okay? And those are the questions you might get asked as an RBT for graphing, okay? Graphing is very easy. A lot of people now have electronic systems that do graphing for us, which is great. If you're still using paper and pencil, okay, graphing is not difficult. All you do is you make a line graph, all right, and you plug in your data, okay? There's your role play and your interview. So task 1 through 3 measurement, you're done, right? Let's look at assessment. I might ask you, what is your role as an RBT in assessment? You would say to assist you, okay? So you're there to help with assessments. For preference assessments, okay, I want you to be doing preference assessments constantly, right? We always want to make sure we're staying up on what our client enjoys. Always looking for, right, reinforcers. So preference assessments, they require us to do it role play or with the client, okay? So let's role play a preference assessment. There are 4 types, right? Single, STEM, forced choice, and then multiple, STEM, with and without replacement, okay? So the most common one you'll do as an RBT, especially in a preference assessment, is going to be a forced choice, okay? So how does that work? Well, you give me 2 items. We're role playing, okay? So I'm the BCBA, and you would hand me 2 items. The eye pencil and the notebook. I choose the eye pencil. So you replace the notebook with phone, okay? Choose. I choose the phone. Place that. I choose the phone. So what is our forced choice hierarchy? Well, I chose the phone twice, the pencil once, the notebook 0. There's our forced choice hierarchy, okay? There's a preference assessment. That's a forced choice preference assessment, okay? Very straightforward. If you're doing a naturalistic assessment, right? If you're doing it with the client, okay, you might be observing the client, right? And watching them as they engage in their environment and taking duration data on what they're engaging in, okay? But you're not manipulating anything, okay? Single stimulus, you're just simply handing different items and seeing their reaction, okay? And then multiple stimulus, which is rare, okay? But you would lay out 3 or more items, right? Have them choose, okay? And depending on if you're doing with or without replacement, okay? You would either put back the item they chose and replace the other items and continue, or you would take out the item they chose, okay? If you're doing without replacement, and then go until you only had 1 left, okay? But preference assessments typically will be either natural, okay, or forced choice in my experience, okay? So there's your preference assessments. Just be familiar with the 4, okay, and be able to conduct forced choice. Preference assessment's really easy, okay? Don't overthink preference assessments. We're just trying to gauge what the client enjoys, right? What they like compared to other items, okay? ABC data. What is ABC? Antecedent behavior consequence. So when we're collecting ABC data, what are we collecting? We're collecting data on what happened before the behavior, what is the behavior, and what happens right after the behavior, okay? So we're looking at antecedents, behavior, consequences. So let's role play, okay? We're going to take A, B, C data, okay, on me drinking water, okay? So start now. I'm thirsty. So starting from I'm thirsty, what is the antecedent? What is the behavior? What is the consequence? The antecedent is me saying, I'm thirsty. It happened right before the behavior. What is the behavior? Drinking water. And what happened right after the behavior? Okay, I put the cap back on. Okay, that's ABC. ABC is very, very easy, very straightforward. Okay, if you're role playing, that's all you're going to do. They're going to contrive something like I did, where I take ABC data on whatever it is, whatever behavior you're looking at. Okay, what happened before, what happened after, and the behavior. If you're with the client, it's even easier. Okay, because a lot of times you'll be familiar with the client. Okay, and they'll actually take ABC data on maybe a maladaptive behavior. Okay, or even a skill. Either way, all you're looking for is what is the behavior, what happened right before, what happened right after, and you record that. Okay, so simple, to the point, easy. All right, so that is 5 tasks down, right? You're moving right along, you're doing well. Okay, now we get into the meat of it. Okay, which is skill acquisition and behavior reduction. Okay, now in this one, 3 must be demonstrated with the client. Okay, because this is really your service delivery. Okay, so for the sake of training, right, we'll just pretend I'm the client. Okay, and I'll demonstrate what it might look like. Okay, so number 6, discrete trial training. Okay, what is DTT? Well, DTT is when you are at the table, right, or you're working in the environment and you're contriving everything. Okay, there's a clear beginning, middle, and end, right? So you're giving an SD, there's a behavior, there's a consequence, corrective feedback, restart. Okay, discrete trial teaching happens very quickly. It's a great way to teach new skills. Okay, so for DTT, hopefully this is the easiest one. Okay, because as an RBT, you should know how to do DTT, right? So how do we do DTT, right? So pretend I'll be the BCBA, okay, and I'll be talking to a client, or I'll be the RBT, I'll be talking to a client, okay, and I want to run discrete trial on identifying body parts, okay. So I would say first on DTT, right, you deliver your SD, touch your ears. Now if the client touches their nose, right, the behavior, your consequence is, no, that's not it. You need to touch your ears, and you might prompt, right? And then what do? Redeliver the SD. Touch your ears, say, client touches ears. Okay, you deliver the consequence, which is the reinforcer. Nice job touching your ears. You do it again. Touch your ears. Nice job touching your ears, right? And you repeat that, okay? That is DTT, okay? DTT, you're delivering the SD, okay, which is followed by the behavior. And then you're either reinforcing it, okay, or you're delivering corrective feedback, okay? And then that loop starts over, right? This time, you might SD prompt behavior, okay? That's DTT, right? Hopefully you understand DTT and how that goes, okay? Since you must do most of these, or some of these with a client, DTT is the most common one, okay? Because throughout the course of your normal session, right? Or if you're working in a clinic, okay, you should have plenty opportunities to do DTT, especially during your training. Hopefully, you learn how to do that. So DTT, straightforward, easy. Naturalistic teaching, it's the same thing. It's even easier, okay? What are we doing when we're doing naturalistic or incidental teaching? We're looking for opportunities, okay, to reinforce the client in their natural, typical environment. Okay, so discrete trial teaching is at the table. It's very contrived. It's not necessarily at the table, but the idea is it's very contrived. It's very controlled. Naturalistic, okay, we're just with the client, observing the client naturally, no demands, nothing like that. We're looking for opportunities to reinforce. Okay, so if I'm role playing, right, and I want to role play naturalistic teaching for manding for an item, or manding is requesting, asking, okay? So naturalistic teaching for asking for an item. And I'm a client who wants cookies, okay? So I say, let's do naturalistic teaching, asking for cookies. So what would you do, right? We might be hanging out, okay, and I start pointing at the cookies, okay? If I'm pointing at the cookies or I'm trying to walk to the cookies, this is a good chance, what? To use this as an incidental teaching moment to try to get me to request, okay, functionally the cookies, okay, assuming I have language. So you might say, okay, what do you want? Okay, evoking me saying either cookie, I want cookie, okay, depending on my level. And then how would you reinforce that? Well, since you're demanding, right, you give me the cookie. And that's naturalistic, okay? You're using incidental teaching, or you're trying to catch the client being good so you can reinforce, or trying to use situations that occur in the natural environment, okay, as teaching moments. Naturalistic teaching. DTT and NET, okay, this is also called NET, right? Super straightforward. Hopefully you guys can do those, okay? Because that's what you're going to be doing every day as RBTs. Chaining, what is chaining, okay? Chaining is a great way to teach a task, okay? How do we get to chaining? Well, first we do a task analysis and we break down a task into steps, okay? There's forward chaining, right? Backward. And total. So for chaining, let's say we're role playing, okay, task chaining for washing hands. Very, very common task chain, okay? I say, as the BCBA, okay, role play with me, you the RBT, forward chaining washing hands. What would you start with, okay? You might start with, okay, you might start with turning the water on, okay, because we're forward chaining, remember? So you prompt me, okay, right, to turn on the water, and you prompt me through all the steps, right? And then you say, okay, let's wash our hands. And when I independently turn on the water, you reinforce and you prompt me through everything else, okay? Forward chaining. Forward chaining, we start with the first step, okay? We teach the first step, prompt everything else. When I can do the first step independently, okay, we teach the first and second, prompt everything else, okay? When I can do first and second, so on. That's forward chaining. So forward, you might start with turn, water on, okay? What about backward chaining, right? Backward chaining, what do we start with? We start with the last step, okay? So I would say let's prompt, okay, or let's chain hand washing. So you would prompt me through everything until the last step, which is dry my hands. But once we get to the last step, you want me to be able to dry my hands independently. You reinforce with escape, okay? So backward chaining is the opposite. We prompt through everything and we teach the last step. Then we prompt through everything, we teach the second and the last step, the second to last and the last step, so on, okay? So forward chaining, you would start by reinforcing, turning water on, backward chaining, drying hands, okay? And then total task chaining, right? That means I can do most of the steps. I just can't do, let's say, step 3 and 5, okay? So you would allow me to do the whole thing, okay? And you would teach steps 3 and 5, right? And that's chaining, okay? All right, what about shaping? Shaping, we are reinforcing approximations of a behavior. What does that mean, okay? We want to teach a whole behavior, let's say pedaling a bike, okay? Or saying the word bubble. If I'm shaping the word bubble, okay? When a client says buh, I reinforce. Once they learn that, I only reinforce when they say bub. Once they learn that, I only reinforce when they say bubble, okay? So we shape that behavior from just a buh to the entire word. Those approximations, buh, bub, and bubble, get reinforced, okay? So let's role play that with me, okay? let's role play shaping the word um, dinosaur. Okay, so you would say, all right, say dinosaur. I'd say duh, duh. You reinforce, and you say dinosaur, duh, duh. Don't reinforce, right? What are we doing? We're trying to shape. You need a bigger approximation. Okay, so say dino. I would say dino. You would reinforce. That's a bigger approximation. Okay, you say dinosaur. I say dinosaur. Reinforce, bigger approximation. Say dinosaur, dinosaur, reinforce. Okay, shape that behavior. Okay, when we're teaching behavior, right, we're not always going to go 0 to 100. Okay, sometimes it goes in steps. Sometimes we need a 0 to a 10 to a 15 to a 30 to a 60, then to 100. Okay, that doesn't mean we only reinforce when it's perfect. Okay, we want to slowly get there. Think about you learning any sort of skill. Okay, you're not going to be perfect off the bat, right? But you still want reinforcement, okay, even when you're learning a skill. And it's the same idea, okay? The better they get at that skill, okay, the more we expect, right? And the more we need to see to reinforce. But when we're just starting, any indication that they're doing the skill, that small approximation should be shaped, okay? That's shaping. Discrimination training. What is discrimination training? Okay, again, something you're going to be doing all the time, right? With discrimination training, we want our clients to learn basically the difference between things. Okay, what's the difference between dog and cat? Red and blue, right? Grandma and mom, right? Two women, one's grandma, one's mom, okay? How do we do discrimination training? Let's say I have a blue mark, okay? And I have a yellow mark. I want to teach my client to discriminate between these two. So let's role play. Okay. You would say touch blue. Let's say I touch yellow. What would you do? You would put it on extinction and give corrective feedback. Oh no, that's yellow. Okay. So now we're doing what? Discrete trial teaching. Redeliver the SD, touch blue, maybe with a prompt. This time I do touch blue. What would you do? Reinforce, right? Reinforce, okay? Now, next time you say touch blue, I touch blue again, reinforce. What if I touch yellow? Extinction. That is discrimination training, okay? You reinforce what you want to see. You put the other behaviors on extinction, okay? When you're teaching discrimination training, you're teaching your client, okay, to engage in behavior in the presence of an SD, okay? In the presence of that same SD, you're teaching them to not engage in behavior. So when I say touch blue, you want me to touch blue, okay, and no other colors. So you're only reinforcing when I touch blue. You're putting everything else on extinction. That's discrimination training, okay? Now you could do that same thing, right, with animals or, foods or whatever. So if you had a tiger, a lion, and a bear on the table, right, and you say, hand me lion, and your client hand you the tiger, you put that on extinction, you don't reinforce, and you redeliver the SD, hand me the tiger, then they hand you the tiger, then you reinforce. That is discrimination training, okay? Again, super straightforward, one of the basic skills, okay? So if you work with young clients, you're doing a lot of discrimination training, okay? Very straightforward, very easy. Stimulus control transfer. This terrifies RBTs, right? Because it seems very, very wordy, very technical. Think of stimulus control transfer as fading a prompt, okay? When you're transferring control of a stimulus, all you're doing, okay, is you're taking a behavior and making it occur in the presence of a different instruction or different SD. So what do I mean? I mean, if my SD is, say, or is a 2 plus 2, okay, but the behavior is occurring under the prompt of me saying 2 plus 2 equals 4, okay? And the client only responds 4 when I prompt them. I need to transfer control from that prompt to that SD. How do I do that? You just fade the prompt, and you're transferring control, okay? So currently, the client saying 4 is under the control of the prompt. We need to get that under the control of 2 plus 2. The client says 4. How do you do that? You just fade the prompt, right? So right now it looks like this, okay? I'm the RBT, I say, what's 2 plus 2? Then I prompt, I say 2 plus 2 equals 4. Then the client says 2 plus 2 equals 4. So now I'm going to fade the prompt. I say, what's 2 plus 2? I say 4. Client says 4. Okay, a little less prompting that time. Fade it again. Okay, what's 2 plus 2? I hold up 4 fingers. Client says 4. Okay, now what is it under control of? We transfer control from 2 plus 2 equals 4 to me holding up 4 fingers. So now transfer it from 4 fingers to just the SD, right? So I just say, what's 2 plus 2? The client says 4. You reinforce. Now that behavior is under control of that SD, okay? All you're doing is fading the prompt, okay? A prompt is acting as an SD, okay? And we need to get that control to the actual instruction by fading the prompt. And that's all we're doing, okay, when we're transferring control of a stimulus, okay? For the most part, right? That's what you need to understand as an RBT, okay? When is that behavior occurring, okay? Is it occurring in the presence of the right SD, okay, or the incorrect SD? The prompting, right? What is prompting? I might say, give me 2 examples of prompting, okay? You might say least to most, most to least. You can say verbal prompt, gestural prompt, right? Physical prompt, okay? A million different ways to prompt. So if we're going to role play, okay, and I say, give me a verbal prompt for saying my name, okay? So I'll be the RBT. I would say, what's your name? Say Alex. Me as the client would say, Alex. I verbally prompted that, okay? Easy verbal prompt. So you have verbal. If you're doing a full physical prompt, hand over hand, right? You know, I would say, okay, physically prompt me to write my name, right? So you would, you know, hand over hand, my hand, and help me write my name, physical prompt, okay? I might say, do a positional prompt, okay, for identifying yellow, right? And I might have a blue line there, okay, black mark there, and then I would put the yellow mark closer to the client or me, role playing, okay? And I'd say touch yellow. Yellow's closer. It's a positional prompt, okay? So when you're prompting during the competency assessment, okay, you'll typically just demonstrate that you know different types of prompts, okay? And then prompt fading, right? We just talked about it, okay? You can do least to most, okay? Least to most, right? Or most to least, okay? So if you're doing most to least, prompt fading, right? You might go from full physical, okay, to maybe modeling what they're supposed to do, to a verbal prompt, right? You're going from a most to a least, or a least to a most, right? So you might go from a gesture, right, to a model, to a partial physical, okay? So when you're prompt fading, okay, all we're doing, right, is demonstrating you understand the hierarchy, right? And your BCBA, right, me would say, demonstrate to me least to most prompting, okay? So we're going to be very explicit on what we're looking for, okay? We're not trying to trick you. We want to see something specific, okay? Something that you're going to generally use a lot. So I'm not going to throw in something very vague, right, that I don't think you're using, okay? So as long as you understand least to most, most to least, okay, and your basic 4 or 5 prompts, right, physical, full physical, gesture, model, verbal, okay, you should be fine, right? All right, token systems, okay? So how do token systems work? Okay, well, tokens act as secondary reinforcers. Okay, you can exchange, right, for backup reinforcers. So token systems are typically on basic reinforcement schedules. Okay, so I might ask you to reinforce me on an FR2 schedule. Okay, and I get 5 tokens, or let's just say 3. Okay, what would you do? Okay, so FR2, what is it? Fixed ratio 2. Every 2 correct responses, what do? You give me a token. That easy, right? So let's demonstrate. The target behavior is touching my eyes. Okay, so you say touch your eyes, I touch my ears. You reinforce? No. 1, I got it wrong. 2, you're on FR2. So again, you say, no, that's not it. Touch your eyes, I touch my eyes. Do you reinforce? You give them a token. No, what's our schedule? Our schedule is FR2, right? So now you say, touch your eyes, I touch my eyes. What do? Second correct response, FR2, reinforce. That's our token. Once I get 3 tokens, okay, what do? You say, all right, give me your tokens in exchange for whatever the reinforcer is, okay? And so you exchange the tokens, and I get a reinforcer in return, okay? So token systems, especially in role play, right, it's going to be very straightforward. All you're doing is delivering tokens as a reinforcer, okay? So whatever your reinforcement schedule is, okay, when they engage in the target behavior, right, you reinforce with tokens. Once they get all their tokens, there are enough tokens, they exchange them for a break or an iPad or a cookie or whatever their reinforcer is. Okay. If you're with the client, they probably have a token board, right, or a token system in place. So ask the BCBA, what is their reinforcement schedule? What is their token economy? Okay. And then implement it. So that's something I forgot to mention. If you're working with a novel client, a client you don't normally work with, it's okay to ask questions during the assessment. It's encouraged. Please ask questions, okay? If you don't know what the reinforcement schedule is, you don't know what the token economy is, okay? Ask questions. Ask a lot of questions, okay? That's the whole idea basically behind this, right? Do you know how to do it? If not, are you willing to communicate with me, the BCBA, that you don't? And if you don't, that's fine. It's my job as the BCBA to communicate it to you, okay? Especially if you've never worked with the client. How will you deliver prompting and stimulus control and token systems and shaping if you don't know the client? So ask questions, okay? Okay, crisis emergency, implement crisis emergency procedures according to protocol. So you'll probably role play this, right? Because you don't want to evoke crisis situations with clients, okay? Unless it's just a bad day and you get caught in a situation where you're doing it with the client. But if you're role playing it, what is a crisis emergency? Well, a crisis emergency is when you're in danger or I'm in danger or somebody's in danger, okay? And when they say according to protocol, right, they're referring to what is your company policy, okay? And then what is ethically correct, okay? So I'm not going to really role play this, right? Because when we role play this, right, it's very over the top, right? We want you to react. But some examples might be me pulling your hair, okay, right? So what is the protocol? You should have learned how to disengage that. So I would imitate pulling your hair and you would disengage, okay? Swatting at you, okay? Pawing at you, hitting at you. How would you block, right? Blocking, okay? I pick up a chair and I'm going to throw it. What do? Okay? I try to elope out of the house or the center. What do? Okay? All these things, right, are crisis emergency situations. The client's in danger, you're in danger, somebody's in danger. How do you react? Okay? So you'll learn about this through your training, and then if you're doing your renewal, okay, hopefully your BCBA and your company has gone over with you, okay, how to respond to these situations. And that's what we want to see, okay? Can you respond in the moment as you're taught? okay? And then 15, demonstrate one of the below tasks, okay? So antecedent interventions, differential reinforcement, or extinction, okay? Well, differential reinforcement is easy because differential reinforcement, right? That's what you're doing during discrimination training, right? So touch blue, right? Blue is reinforced, yellow is extinction. That's differential reinforcement, right? Now, DRA, okay, DRO, right? You need to know what these procedures are, okay? So what is DRO? DRO is we're reinforcing when a behavior isn't happening, okay? So we pick a target behavior. So if I'm role playing, right, I say implement DRO, okay, for me taking my hat on and off. So what would you do? How would you implement DRO there for me taking my hat off? Well, as soon as I stop taking my hat off, you reinforce, okay? DRO is reinforcing in the absence of a behavior. In that case, taking my hat on and off, okay? So what about DRA? DRA is differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors, okay? So we're trying to teach a replacement behavior, okay? So we're reinforcing the proper behavior, okay, and putting the other behavior on extinction. So let's role play raising my hand in class instead of shouting out the answer, okay? So I'm role playing it. 2 plus 2, 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 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4. As soon as I raise my hand, you reinforce me raising my hand. You might say, well, the other behavior is happening as well. Agreed, but that behavior is on extinction, and only when I raise my hand do I receive reinforcement. That's DRA, right? Those behaviors can occur at the same time, but you're only reinforcing, okay, the one you want, which is raising your hand, okay? What are antecedent interventions? Antecedent interventions are implementing interventions for situations that occur before the behavior, okay? So motivating operations, okay, SDs, right? So the most common would be role play with me, okay? We're gonna manipulate an MO, okay, for me. So I love ice cream, right? And you're gonna use ice cream as a reinforcer, okay, during our session. Manipulate the antecedent to make ice cream more valuable to me. What would you do? Well, you would withhold ice cream for me until session, until I could get reinforced. Why? Because the more I'm deprived of ice cream, the longer I go without ice cream, the more valuable that becomes. So antecedent, right? Before the behavior, before I start engaging in the behaviors, right? You're manipulating my motivation to work for ice cream, okay? Or do the right thing for ice cream, okay? What about motivating the environment, or manipulating the environment, okay, to prevent behaviors? Antecedent interventions, preventative strategies, right? Let's say your client, every time, this actually happens a lot. Every time, you bring a cup, not a lot, but I've seen it happen. You have a cup of water, right? And you know your client, when they see that cup of water, okay, they're going to start swiping, okay? So role play with me what you would do with this cup of water, right? And this client, I'm the client. Would you put that right in front of them? Okay. No, what am I going to do? What's the behavior? I'm going to knock it right off the table, right? You're manipulating things that happen before the behavior, either the environment, okay, or motivating operations, okay, to alter or control the behavior. So you would put that cup, either you keep the top on or you keep it far away from me. You're manipulating antecedents. And then extinction. What is extinction? Extinction is removing reinforcement from a previously reinforced behavior. Okay, so this is really good with the client extinction procedures. Okay, because with role playing with me, it's almost too contrived. But you might have an opportunity with the client to do it. So let's say your client was previously reinforced. Every time I said the word dog, okay, you would respond woof. And woof was reinforcement for me saying dog. So now I just say dog all the time. I want to put that on extinction, saying the word dog. How would you put that on extinction? Okay, so let's role play. Dog. Dog, 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 dog. If you're not saying woof and delivering reinforcement, it's extinction, right? Extinction is just stopping reinforcement for previously reinforced behavior. Very straightforward. And then I might ask you, what's an extinction burst? You would say it's an expected increase in behavior when you put a behavior on extinction. Okay. All right. There you go. So you get through the hardest part of it, right? And we get to professionalism and requirements, which are all interview stuff. Okay. So I, as the BCBA, will start asking you questions on what I kind of expect, right? In terms of client dignity, professional boundaries, things like that. So for session notes, typically I would, as a BCBA, say, well, let me see your session notes. Okay, I will just read a few of your session notes and see what they look like. And what am I looking for? I'm looking that they're objective, they're complete, okay, and that they contain relevant information, okay? I don't want a bunch of opinions in the session notes. The session note should tell me exactly what happened. I'm not there, okay? I should be able to read it and know exactly what happened during session, at least the important things, right? I'm not looking for a book, right? We need to know, what'd you run? Did you use any new reinforcers? Was anything mastered? Did behaviors occur? Okay. Did parents mention anything? Did anything change? Okay. Stuff very relevant to the client in an objective fashion. And that'll be session notes, right? I'll probably read your session notes. If it's a brand new initial competency, okay, I might ask you, okay, what do you need? And that's what you would tell me, right? Well, you want me objective, you want me complete, okay, etc. Provide examples of how to maintain client dignity. I would say, give me an example of maintaining client dignity. You would say, not withholding food and water, right? You would say, including the client in treatment planning. You would say, treating the client how I would treat anyone else, right? You would say, talking to the client at a skill and an age-appropriate level, okay? Client dignity is really all about respect, okay? And respecting your client in a way you would respect anyone else. And that's a great answer. You told me that, I would love it, right? Give me examples, okay? Talk to them at age level. Don't talk to a 15-year-old like they're 2, right? Get on their level, right? Get to know them, build rapport, okay? All of these things are examples of client dignity, okay? Good. Professional boundaries, provide examples of how to maintain professional boundaries. The correct answer, the best answer here is no dual relationships. What's a dual relationship? A dual relationship is when you hold a professional and a personal relationship with your client. So if you're working with the client, okay, you don't become best friends with mom and dad, right? You don't go golfing with dad, okay? You don't go to the gym with mom, right? You don't babysit on your off time. You don't attend parties on your off time, okay? Professional boundaries means no dual relationships, and that's the right answer. Supervision requirements, I would say, how much supervision do you need? You would say, I need 5% of the hours I work in a month, okay? Which would mean you would need me, the BCBA, or your BCBA to be out there supervising you, okay? You would also need to get your form signed, right? And you need to turn those forms in, okay? So it's your responsibility as the RBT to keep track of your supervision monthly, 5%. And then clinical direction. Describe one situation to me when you would seek clinical direction. You might say, when a behavior occurs that I haven't seen before, when I'm running a new program that I don't understand, when I feel that parents are crossing the line, when I feel that abuse might be going on, when I am confused about a program, when I accidentally reinforce a behavior, When parents ask me a question about the new diet they read, parents requested parent training. I mean, there's a million answers to clinical direction. And boom, you've done your assessment. Okay, you're either now, if it's your initial, okay, ready to apply for the RBT exam. If it's a renewal, okay, you're just going to continue being an RBT, right? And then I would just, sign names, right? Certification, BCBA, boom, boom, okay. And you're good to go, right? And we turn that in, submit it, ready to rock, okay? And there you go. That's your initial competency. Again, don't overthink it, okay? That's all there is to it, right? We want to make sure that you have the skills necessary, okay, before you take your exam. And again, if you've already taken your exam, okay, are you maintaining the skills necessary to be an RBT? Okay? Don't freak out, right? It's not meant to be a stressful thing, okay? It's a necessary thing, okay? So again, I'll put all the timestamps below, right? So you can jump around. Any questions, please reach out. Hope it's helpful. As always, if this is your initial, okay, please come back and watch my exam videos, okay, to help you pass the exam, get the study materials. Any questions about the exam, reach out, let me know. Other than that, keep working hard. If you're an RBT already, keep doing good. If not, good luck on your journey, and I'll be back Wednesday.